number of things that were productive in terms of questions that I asked myself about the book, and some of those questions, ordinarily I would consider them to be bad questions. They are not properly framed. But I preserved them because they were productive. So, one of the questions I asked myself is, why is John Maxwell Coetzee, another prominent South African writer, why is he, in one sense, more celebrated, more successful? He's won more awards than Andre Brink has. I think that's a bad question, but I don't want to get into why that's a bad question. What I want to go into is the productivity of that question in thinking carefully about the kind of writer that Andre Brink is. I would say one of the things that jumped out at me reading Andre Brink is that he's a very hopeful writer. He's confronting what he himself describes through the voices of his characters as a grave darkness, I paraphrase, but his overall tone is one of hopefulness. Now, let me remind us, I know that an older generation of Nigerians were very deeply committed to the liberation struggle in South Africa. And there's a new generation of people, both in Nigeria and South Africa, who have some distance from that struggle, both in South Africa and the vicarious participation of people in Nigeria. The point I'm trying to get to is that there's some facts about that period in time that have been forgotten. The period in time is the weeks leading up to South Africa's first democratic elections, April 1994. Some of our people were observers of that election, but in that period there was a lot of political violence. In fact, if we go back to 1992, there are many things that happened that I know that a lot of people have forgotten. First, the clerk held a referendum in 1992 to get the mandate of the white South Africans to proceed in the negotiations with ANC. Also in 1992, the clerk had to retire some military officers to try to forestall a military coup that could have derailed the transition process. But in the middle of the year, there were massacres. In fact, there were over 1,500 incidents of political violence, leading to the deaths of over 200 people. That was in 1992. And that orgy of violence would continue into the weeks leading up to the elections. Now, what Andre Brink does is present all of these instances of arson, murder, lynch mobs, and all of that. But one of the characters says, the worse things got, the more sanguine the society became, the more they invested their hope in the transition process. So, I've said a lot of things, but to bring it home, with respect to the theme of the festival, Andre Brink presents a very dark time in the history of South Africa, a very violent time. And that's central to the plot of the story. However, he also has the characters say and do things that show that whenever there was an incident that was dark, the people created their own light. And it's now history that if you had looked at the lead up to the 1994 elections, some people were already projecting that there would be civil war in South Africa, that South Africa was going to fall apart. A lot of exiles, which is a theme that comes up in the book that you read. A lot of people who were divesting, businesses divesting, but none of those were realized. And what Brink, I imagine, was trying to communicate in his book is that it's not the facts that matter, it's the interpretation that you put on them. So, I think that speaks to the theme. Things can be dark, but what do you take from them? You can take light out of the dark. So that's
Thank
the
you.
book.
I want to ask this of okay. These guys in the conversation talk about how we tie, these ebbs and flows of history, and how music is so critical to defining for us not only how these ebbs and flows impact us, but how we relate through the arts. They really spend a lot of time talking about the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict. And they had done something. They actually brought children from Palestine and children from musicians to come and have a concert together. And I was very, very interested in the week of rehearsals before the performance, and how one of the Palestinian musicians was shocked that an Israeli musician could play a certain instrument that they believed had a Jewish, a Palestinian origin. There is a way in which I do think, the arts is intertwined in how we interpret even what you will call communal experiences like history. What were your thoughts as you read that in the conversation of these two great guys?
I think one of the things that I think I took away from the book was, apart from the specificity of the Israeli-Palestinian issue that they covered, was the universality of the role of the artist. And I particularly enjoyed the conversation around, can you divide the artist from his art? And I think in a world where we have P. Diddy, R. Kelly, it's something we really have to think about. For myself, I don't dance to step in anymore. If I go to a wedding and I hear it, I leave the dance floor. And I think that sometimes with the artist, you can become so self-indulgent with your art that you think that self-indulgence extends to what you can do with the manipulation of other people around you. And in doing that, you become narcissistic, and that plays out in your personal life. However, should your art be disregarded? And the example that they use in the book, obviously, is Wagner. Now, Wagner obviously is heralded for his output, for the quality of his work, for the amount of writing he did, but at the same time, he was a hero of the Nazis for exactly that same reason. He was played in the camps. I think it's a very difficult, nuanced conversation, and I think that it's something that as our lives become more open, social media has allowed the intrusiveness of everybody's life to be more public. I think if we really have to think about, is the artist entitled to his or her privacy in which to do whatever he or she likes, and do we keep that privacy on a pedestal so that we can admire the art, or do we allow a light to illuminate it so it can be tarnished?
Thank you. I want to actually continue with that, because there is also this theme in the book about the artist, the art, and the environment. Is the music an interpretation of what's going on for us to better understand our times? Or is the artist a public intellectual, a philosopher, who is also taking a position and using the art to educate us? You and I were having that wonderful conversation also outside before we began about what you considered even how we understood music itself. The silences, all of that. I thought it was a really interesting conversation where you were going with it. Just expand on that for me, the way that I think this conversation sort of frames that as well.
Okay, so it was very interesting to read and to be made to think about music as being something that exists because there's silence. I liked your comment about darkness and light because it's very similar. You know, one is because the other exists. And so I had never thought of, music appears to be there all the time, to be listened to be enjoyed. And I never really thought about it with respect to silence. And then I realized that it really had it had an importance, it had an interpretation, and that it had a role that it played, particularly in classical music. And I think because the discourse was around classical music, a lot of emphasis was put on how, operas and such performances gain their authenticity and their expression from the use of silence, right? But then the conversation also moved on to how society is now less educated about music. And so there's a big gulf between the composers and the performers and the audiences of today, contemporary audiences. And then I realized I was part of that contemporary audience as well, and then started to look at how they were seeing today's world, because where they were coming from, the performance in itself was almost like a dialogue with the audience, which really doesn't exist today with contemporary music. Then the question was around, have we lost something? What have we lost here? Education seems to be much more about information, right, than knowledge. And so we're throwing more and more information at people as opposed to they're gaining knowledge. And that was a tough one for me because, like Aduke said, the role of social media and the way that we express ourselves these days is beginning to change the context of how we relate to the arts, so to speak. So I don't know. I was left with this open question because I really don't have an answer for that. I know that currently in Lagos, because I can't say in Nigeria, there's an increased interest in music. So you have music schools popping up all over the place. People are getting involved in playing instruments and all of that. The question in the book was, can you really go back to the past? People want to go back and capture the past. Can you be in the present and capture the past? No, you want to capture 18th century music, you have to be an 18th century person to do it properly. So what is it that we're capturing at the moment? So it's almost I felt as if they were speaking about a transition of some sort. Yes. What the end result is going to be, I absolutely have no idea. But we seem to be in that transition. But what I took away from that conversation was that with respect to political conflicts, because of what happened with the experiment with the young people from both the Arab nations and the Israelis, that it actually could be used as a platform to have the conversation and to try and solve solve social and political problems.
I really like that you end that way, because one of the things that I think the book also underscores is what is the artist's place in a time of such rapid transitions as we're beginning to see, and how that transition is going to become even more intense and perhaps even more violent, and how people understand their times seems to be something that the artist is going to be smacking the center of. And so as we also have, this is the Soyinka year, Soyinka as an artist, as a poet, as a playwright, his interventions over this period of time, you ask yourself, how different is that generation? Because he is really the generation of Daniel Barenboim and the generation of Edward Said. How different did they see, and I'm hoping you just speak to this based on your experience, how different do they see their place with regard to the interpretation of experiences, whether it's historical or contemporary, how compared to artists today? We have artists today with more tools, more capacities, more training, more equipment than the Soyinkas and the J.P. Clarks had in their time. But there seems to be less of a willingness to even understand, contemporary issues, speak not of to try to interpret it to an audience, whether in an artistic voice or not.
I think that there's been a shift in emphasis between the generations. It seems to me that for the generation of public intellectuals that include Professor Soyinka, Professor Said, and this is a very subjective view, that the political and the politicization of issues was more focal than the social and the socialization of issues. And that the times in which we live are the times of the social. So let me try to illustrate that. When I was very young, when we spoke about exiles, it was usually people who were persecuted by the state, who were fleeing from whoever was the president or the head of the secret police or whatever. That was when you said the word exile, when I was much younger, it meant a political exile. However, today, the people who are exiles there's a tendency for them to be social exiles because their society rejects their sexuality, because their society cannot provide the material sustenance that they feel that they deserve. All of these are, of course, the social, the economic, the political, they are all intertwined. But I think that for an older generation, there was a greater focus on the political, using power to solve problems. However, we live in an age where the social is more prominent. The focus is on the social, and the examples are numerous. It's as simple as comparing Professor Soyinka's cousin, Fela, and his music to all of his inheritors of today, whether it's Wizkid in style or Burna Boy in some kind of activism. You can see the marked difference, right? And another factor that I think is quite central is something that I began to observe when I was an undergraduate. Up until that point, the global figures in popular conversation were Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. But at that moment, while I was an undergraduate, I saw a shift. The global figures were becoming the billionaires. The then owner of Microsoft, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, even the current president of the incoming president of the United States, Donald Trump. And I felt, why is this change going on? Why was it that when I was younger, the global figures were people who stood for human rights, who were political figures in that sense, and right now, the main figures that are celebrated are people who have succeeded in business, who are billionaires, and I would like to add that Andre Brink is also a writer from this older generation. Because one of the things that a novelist has to do is provide us with ciphers with which we can interpret our experiences. And in trying to do some of that, he uses the word businessman in a derogatory way. And you could feel in the texture of the story that he expects his readers to take that symbol, businessman, to mean something negative. But in the context in which I was reading the book in 2024, businessman is what a lot of people aspire to be. So, in summary, I think that we are in a world now where the social is probably more focal than the political. And I think that explains some of the differences that we are seeing.
Thank you. The other big argument in the book, or I would say the other conversation that I think is also worthy of us exploring, is the value of cultural exchanges in the end. There seems to be this emphasis these days about, soft power, how much each country is trying to exchange their creative voices, their creative products, and so there is a conversation of, in the end, having brought all the, done this big concert with these two sides, what actual effect did it have beyond symbolism? So the question for you, because I know you've worked in the space of cultural exchange for a while, beyond symbolism, what really, in a world so tense and so filled with discords and paradoxes, as it were, what truly is the value of these exchanges?
I think if we start with the book, okay, I think that the value of their conversations and their cultural exchange, on the surface it sounds fantastic. It's great. It's a wonderful thing to do. But classical music in itself is elitist. It's not accessible to everybody, even within the communities within which these two men come from. So even the access to the skills, the access to the piano, to the flute, underprivileged boys and girls in New York don't have that kind of access. So automatically, who were the children they were giving this access to? Who were the children who could play this music? Who were the children who, on either side of the divide, who would be able to be, as Toki said, educated enough to understand these conversations? And when you want to put in place a cultural exchange, you have to, I think, look at what the commonalities are and not decide, oh yes, I want to bring ballet because I do ballet, and I think it's a good thing, and I want to bring ballet and teach it to people who are doing atilogu, and think that the people who are doing atilogu don't have anything to teach the people who are doing ballet. if you don't understand that each art itself has something to teach, then you can find yourself in a situation where you are doing colonialism by art. And if we want to take the second speaker's comment about Fela, for instance, he started off in classical music. He was a classically trained artist. When he came back and became more radical, he understood that in order to engage with the populace, he had to change the kind of music he played. And it was doing that that developed Afrobeat. If he had continued playing piano and high life, he would not be as radical, because the format of highlight music, Onidodo, Onimoimoim, it doesn't take us to zombie. It doesn't. And so if you're going to do cultural exchange, if you are going to think that you're going to use art to drive a change, you have to be able to understand what art are you going to use that can engage the people that you want to move.
To the extent of co-curation, because I think that's also part of what they're talking about. The idea that it's not just that we are bringing our music to your environment, is that we are making music together. There's a lot of that's going on with, contemporary musicians, contemporary artists as well. My question is, what is the value? What has been the outcome? What is it that, because it hasn't made the world less tense, and it hasn't made the world more understanding of each other. That's really what the heart of their conversation is. And I was just wondering how you would see it, given that you've actually spent a lot of time trying to do just that.
So I wonder whether in this book, this conversation, they used classical music, which is not intrinsic to either of the local populations.
Exactly, yeah.
So how
about their
so yes, so how are they going to be touching the people? Perhaps if they had genuinely sat down and said, you know what, this is the kind of music we use traditionally. This is the kind of music you use traditionally. How can we fuse that? And then perhaps it might not just be the memories in the book. Perhaps it might be, because I think it's a great idea. I think that 20 years ago it would have been seen as a great step. But I think 20 years later we can look at it and we can begin to wonder, is it a bit of an imposition? Because it's not the cultural language of either of the populations where they were going to perform. Yes, and I think that the value of the cultural exchange is to get to the heart of what the people are doing. Work that I've done, for instance, in working with the Irish Embassy to publish work of Nigerian poets and Irish poets. We've been careful to choose, on the Nigerian side, for instance, Nigerian poets who are rooted here, who work here. The Irish poets can be and have been the Nigerian poets who have moved or have grown up in Ireland, but it's very clear they are Irish poets. So there isn't a mixture that, okay, we'll count you as Nigerian because you are of Nigerian heritage. Because I think that when you are working culturally and trying to maneuver within two worlds, you have to make sure that both the worlds are on an equal balance and are both positions equally. Otherwise, somebody's going to be upset.
Well, we are almost towards the end of this, and I'm going to preserve some minutes for the audience to make comments. But I just want to throw this out in and just your thoughts. Because again, one of the last things that I think the book throws up is the fears about what musical education, the fears about process, the idea that we're moving into a phase in history now where authorship of creative works can become automated. AI is coming, but even right now you have music that is actually, algorithm driven, sampling. These two guys only know music from the perspective of classical music, classical education. There is a whole language of music that they think is so critical to the capacity of the next generation to think originally and in a way be elevated in even how they process experiences. As last word, where do you think, because these guys in another 5 years will be like ancestors, the process of making music that they describe and speak so wonderfully about here would be irrelevant. Today, the biggest artists are not even musicians. They sing. It's a producer that produces the beats for them. They just come up with a draft of words, and if there's a rhyme, they fit it into the beats that somebody else creates, but because of the star system, we think they are musicians. Where do you, in another 10 years, when these guys, when they look back, do you think they're going to be worried, or do you think even a musical culture driven by algorithms can still impact society in the ways in which they were discussing?
Okay, so last words are, I think I got the feeling that intrinsically they knew that, because either Said or Darren said, classical music is like Latin, right? It's truly like Latin. Its time has come and it is going, right? So I think the world has changed, it's changing drastically. Now what that does to the performer, the composer, even writers and film directors, what it's going to, and lawyers, what it's going to do to the rest of us, I think these professions are going to become differently defined. I think things that are repetitive are going to become mechanical. So that is not what is going to make you the film director that you are, or the lawyer that you are, or the writer that you are. But that authenticity or originality that you bring to the work. Now, how that is preserved is what actually concerns me, because that is what defines the person. I remember the conversation they had about composers, and is it about how good the guy looks in his tuxedo, or or what inspires him to perform, and it's truly about what inspires him to perform. So 10 years from now, I think there's going to be all kinds of music. I mean, I walked in here and I started having a headache before I got to this building, and I thought, oh my God, Toki, you're getting old. This is how I know I'm getting old, because I was just hearing bing, 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 the way they will be hearing sounds and not music, So I think it's going to continue to be defined. I think, but there's still a space, I think, for, what do we call them now? What do you think we call them? Those that come, the kind of music that comes from craft, right? In terms of the original, traditional, sort of, those ones are evolving as well. But I think they still have their place, and what we're going to do with them is, your guess is as good as mine.
For my final words, I would like to sort of connect aspects of Andre Brink's life and struggle to this book. So, reading about South Africa and thinking about their own struggles in the context of our own struggles in Nigeria, one gets the sense that to the Afrikaner society before 1994, there was a successful demonization of the ANC, and that writers like Andre Brink felt, earlier you were asking, does art really contribute anything? Does it make anything different? So writers like Andre Brink defined their role in terms of humanizing the order, to say that those guys in ANCs, they are not terrorists, they are not monsters, they're exactly human beings like you and I. Now, a lot of young Afrikaners from the 1960s had sort of begun to see writers like Andre Brink as thought leaders. So they shaped these people's imaginaries and their attitudes to politics. So when Andre Brink came to say to them that, oh, look, Thabo Mbeki is in exile in Lusaka. I was in his house. We listened to Beethoven together, right? For his audience, that served to humanize Thabo Mbeki, right? And of course, we can have a lengthier conversation about the contradictions between Andre Brink's existentialism as philosophical practice and then his political commitment and all of those things. But what matters now is, where is that South Africa that all of these people fought for? Where is it today, right? And then where is it going? So in May, a new government of unity had to be formed, because for the first time in 30 years, the ANC could not poll a majority in the elections, right? And over the past 200, or the first 100 days in office of the inflation has gone down, the rand has strengthened, there are some positive notes, but the structural challenges are still untouched. So what is the role of the artist in this? Andre Brink is gone. So the artists of today, what can they contribute? I think one of the few things or many things that artists in South Africa and in Nigeria can contribute to the struggles that remain is to encourage people to be hopeful, right? Let's face these challenges squarely. The artists will tell the truth, so we can face the challenges squarely, but let's be hopeful that we can work together and solve our problems. So those are my words.
Well, thank you. If there was anything I think that defines the commonality between the two books that we're reviewing, is really the place of the artistic impulse. For me, I think what makes these guys interesting is how seriously they take themselves as artists. And if you ask me if there's anything that I think we as a country that has such a very busy and vibrant artistic culture, is that I'm not sure that our artists think they're doing serious art, but they don't take themselves seriously. And if you're going to, as we celebrate Professor Soyinka, what I think the difference between him, his time, and the artists that are putting out creative products out there is how much responsibility they are willing to take a position, to have what you would even describe as a creative philosophy, because Professor Soyinka has, to decide humanistically what your interventions have to be and how they are going to be. One of the things I find interesting is that it took a long time, almost 2 months, somebody was saying, after the Chibok girls were taken, almost all the first artistic commentaries came from artists that were of a certain age. Everyone that were actually contemporary to the victims, who were artists, were making love stories and love songs, which would then say to you that, is it a shyness to intervene? Is it a lack of understanding of their own self importance, or is it that they do not take that art, they do not think the art has enough potential to impact and intervene. I'm just going to park it here to allow, you want to make a comment? Yes, your last words, please do. But we might have to come back because we want to give 10 minutes to the audience to also respond to the thoughts that have been put out there. Please.
So my last word is actually a cheat. It's a quote. All societies are made up of a majority of average citizens who follow all the established patterns, and a tiny number who, by virtue of their talent and their independent inclinations, are not at all average and in many ways are a challenge and even an affront to the usually docile majority. The problems occur when the perspective of the docile majority tries to reduce, simplify, and codify the complex and unroutine people who are a tiny minority. And I think that is what the artist has to decide for themselves. I need to be part of that tiny minority.
That's all. We're throwing this to the audience now. You want to use our mic?
Yeah, thank you. I found the discussions very fascinating, but I want to be brief to say that I also would have wanted you guys to have looked at Edward Said a little bit more, because what made Edward Said more prominent was his concept and his book called Orientalism, in which he was actually navigating the idea that the West was contemptuous of the East, and that's why I came with the word Orientalism. And how do you put that in the context interrelationship of art and artists in the world? I also wanted you guys to look at what happened with this collaboration in the context of the war going on now in the Middle East with the invasion of Israel and then the backlash against Hamas, and to look at the whole idea whether, while it is good to really collaborate, where do you place authenticity within all of this? Is it possible? And we're in a global world. The elections in the US recently has showed that, and even in parts of Europe in the past few years have shown that while globalization was seen as a good thing, there's a great backlash against it, and so many people are saying, like the Yoruba say, Tiwa, mine is mine, and you know, east is east, west is west, and never the twain shall meet. How do we really think that we can actually get collaboration going, and not only collaboration among cultures, among peoples, even among generations? You know, you were talking about the generations you saw. Some other people will tell you that they saw different people than you saw in your own generation. I mean, if you saw Martin Luther King and all of that at that time, some people saw Muhammad Ali, and it depends on what you were looking, what angle you were looking at the world. You know, the days, if you were Marxists in those days, you were looking at the East. Some people were looking at Leah Coca, and I was making money in the same generation. So it depends. There's a lot of collage and also separation. So I like to see that kind of conversation.
I'm just going to park that because I think the answer is flowing in the wind, as they say. It's a very difficult poses in terms of how the history of the world is evolving and the difficulties therein. We have very little time, so I'll allow two more comments, or one more.
Let's have two
more comments, and then we would have to say our thank yous.
Yeah. Good evening, staff and mass. I've just finished a piece of work in which I hybridized The Gods Are Not to Blame and Oedipus. And I came out with the conclusion that the gods are really to blame. Then after that, I needed a picture, and I sought for a Yoruba boy as one of the narrators of the story, and a Greek boy as one of the narrators. With AI, it just gave me the Yoruba boy and him. if we take naturalism away, especially from music, like you are saying, are we still going to be enjoying music?
He's asking if we take nationalism out of music, naturalism, yeah, will we still enjoy? By naturalism, you mean music that's not made by algorithms? Yeah. Well, AI are also very cultural because they are taking what you created. AI is just aggregation, and the aggregation is still your work, but it is not just your work. So the IP part of it is what's going to be most interesting. Oh yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
I'm Olaolu. I was drawn to the comment about the dispensation being more social than being more conscious. And let me speculate that it will continue to be more social. Because when you do a little comparison, for those of us who grew up, even the Fuji musicians who, let me say, quote and unquote, had no business with consciousness, but were conscious. Barrister sang about consciousness. Colinti sang about consciousness. If you look at the average musicians in the 80s, they had one song that had to do with consciousness. But today you are going to scratch to find anybody doing that. Because it's just, unfortunately too, technology has made us to be zombies, where we're just programmed to just, behave in a particular way, just for likes, just for engagement, and it affects every facet of, art. So my own point is that I'm afraid it will continue to be, because that consciousness, until maybe there's an event that jolts us out of that, I'm afraid it will continue.
Thank you. A final comment? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Rafiu Williams. Mr. Omatsheye spoke about Edward Said. Omatsheye spoke about Edward Said. I would have loved to see the thrust of the conversation on what he suggested, and also bringing in Daniel Barenboim's perspective of Semitism, and its virulent, campaign. He was a Jew. I think he's still alive, a Jew, but he's extremely against what is going on in his home country of, Israel. I haven't read the book, but my personal perspective is that they were just doing some intellectual gymnastics, with that book. The real thing is in their politics. Mr. Barenboim's politics of being virulently against, what, goes on in Israel. And beyond Edward Said's Orientalism, there's also politics in his literature. And it is where his own perspective of the politics of, the Palestinian territory area, aligns with that of, Barenboim, right? And that probably led, to the collaboration, between the two of them in terms of what can be achieved, right, in that area by the two sides of the Israelis and the Palestinians. So what they sought to do, talking about whether we're talking about a classical, music or not, it is to bring, the two sides of humanity, together. And as you said about Mr. Brains also, that after all, they are human beings. So I've seen them. I had dinner with Mr. Mbeki yesterday. I had whiskey with him last night. He's after all a human being. But the ANC that you perceive as a terrorist organization is actually fighting for the cause of its people. Just as the Palestinians were actually fighting for the cause, of their people as well, which Edward Said supported through literature, and also Barenboim, through, music. And they both use their position as public intellectual and as artists, to promote, peace, on the two sides. I would have loved to see the politics of, their game, discussed, further.
Thank you very much. We're done now. I want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for your patience and for your intervention. And thank you, Labaf, for a beautiful opportunity. Cheers.
We are grateful, sir, for the efficient and wonderful job. I want to use the opportunity to thank the panelists again, the brilliant panelists, and of course, the reliable and committed filmmaker and cultural archivist, Mr. Femi Odugbemi. Please, let's applaud them. Before they go to their differences, we'd like to do the regular. We'll have a group pictures to memorialize, capture the moment. I'll call on the chairman of the Kora Board of Trustees, Chief Kayode Adeiroko, as well as Secretary General of Kora. I don't know if Mr. Ben Tomoloju is here to join. What about Professor Adeoti? Are you still here, Prof? Please join us. And sir, please indulge me. Just join us. Let's have a group picture. Of course, Mr. Tade Badiola. Okay, let's look at the cameras and say Kora. Say cheers. Say cheers. Okay. Thank you so much. Just a rundown of the other activities we'll be having up today, the lineup for today. Immediately after this, we'll be having Author House conversation here at the Kongi Harvest Gallery by 5 p.m. And that one is equally an interesting theme, sub-theme. Hope will win. A conversation around Chigozie Obioma's The Road to the Country. And we have a brilliant moderator here. You know, it will be a combination of old and new. We'll be having Mr. Kunle Ajibade, writer, journalist. Olakunle Fadairo, writer, activist. Mercy Timilei Kilani, writer, activist. It's going to be a blend of old and new. After that, by 6 p.m. we'll be having a book trek here at the Kongi Harvest Gallery, reading our conversations around Behind the Doors of Faith by Prince Nduka alum, Grand Touch Media Service Ltd. We'll be having book boy, Mr. Obaya, 2023. Okay. Of course, Mr. Henry Akimuru has been here. I hope he's here right here in the hall. We'll be considering his own work, Yam Tarawala, the Warrior King, by Abibima Publishing 2023. Then, this fiction called Nigeria, The Struggle for Democracy by Adewale Majapiet. Yes, you can't hear because there is noise everywhere. Let's just take in here, ladies and gentlemen. 5 minutes. Yes, the DJ, please. Jazz it up. Please don't go too far from here. In the next 5 minutes, we'll be reconvening. Just 5 minutes, please. 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. You could just use the intervals to go down, walk around, stretch your legs. Go to the Freedom Park cell unit to buy books for yourself, for your children, for your wards, for your community. In fact, you need a personal library. We all need personal libraries. Thank you very much. See you in 5 minutes' time. 5 p.m. on the dot, we'll be here for Author House Conversation, right here at Kongi Harvest Art Gallery. Hope will win. Hope will win. That is one sub-theme you wouldn't want to miss out on. So let's come back here, 5 o'clock on the dot, to be starting off. Thank you.
kidding. So, once again, it's a pleasure to have you in the audience. We have a very interesting book for this panel. Chigozie Obioma's latest, I think it's a 2024 book. Yes, The Road to the Country. It revisits the question of the Civil War, the Nigerian Civil War, from a very interesting perspective. But I promise not to hoard the mic because I have two highly informed panelists who are of the same generation as the author, and they are here to, give us their impressions of this new effort. It's a big book. It's not a small book. But I'll start from my left, as usual, even though they say ladies first. And I'm going to ask you, Kunle, what was your overall impression of this book after you finished the last page?
All right, good evening, everyone. It is great to be here this evening. My overall impression on this book, let me start by saying that I've read Afrobi Yellow Sun, and also I've read Festus Iyayi, Heroes. And my conclusion about these two books is that Nigeria are actually, Nigeria versus the Biafra are actually fighting a war which has no cause. That is my impression. And, when I read Afrobi Yellow Sun, I had to pick one side. When I read Heroes again, I picked another side. But when I read The Road to the Country, thanks to The Man Died that I have seen, I believe that The Road to the Country is totally different from the two books I've read, to be honest. And my conclusion is going to be the comment Professor Wole Soyinka said, what is the cause of this war? What is the cause of this war? And I believe that is the impression I figure out when I finish this book, that Wole Soyinka is asking, that is Chigozie Obioma is asking the question, who caused this war? And why do we have this war? Because during I watched The Man Died, Wole Soyinka said something when he was in the prison. He said, who shook the jar? And he was asking the inmates, and he was repeating the same words, who shook the jar? Because when I read this book, I realized that Biafra
her husband got killed by the opposing party. Her sons, her children got killed. And that was the only way she could chew out her rage. That was the only way she could open up, she could find closure, so to speak. That was the only source of solace that she felt like she could find. So if she was being deprived of that, she could have committed suicide. She could have done other, yeah, I understand she later died, but then she must have felt accomplished that, okay, I was not subjected to the Red Cross or to sitting at home to hiding or to doing this. She must have felt accomplished that, okay, she was able to do what she wanted to do because she felt like doing it would honor her dead husband, would honor her late sons. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm coming back to, it's a very, yes. Now, in your own reading, you put this book somewhat in comparison, juxtaposition to the ones that came before. But it's described in many ways as a metaphysical novel of the war, which takes account of seers, prophets, divination, what was foreseen. But you know, the truth of the matter is that even those who were not seers and prophets saw the logical conclusion of the progression of what was happening at that time. And earlier you said it meant that some things could have been done to mitigate or maybe to even stop the war. But a second reading is this, that perhaps the man Chigozie Obioma wanted to be a Dostoevsky. He wanted to look into the minds of the dramatis personae in that war. And you concluded already that those people did not know what they were doing. But then, going back to what was said before the panel started, don't you think the gods had something up their sleeves when they were saying to you, this is going to happen, and it did happen? And do you not think that the lesson for us is, having gone through that passage, how not to make that thing happen again? I don't know whether I'm taking too much of your time.
All right. One of the things about my analysis is to allude to different works that has been written. So I'm going to allude to a poem titled Vanity by Biago Diop. And there's a particular line said, when the dead comes with their dead, we turn a deaf ear. So I love that particular line in that poem. One thing about that, because yes, truly the novel is a metaphysical thing that is talking about things that has not happened. If you remember, you know, the story was taking a kind of a trajectory progression towards Kunle was not even born at the beginning, and towards the end, we realized that the cell went to Kunle's house, Kunle's house, met Kunle's father and mother, tried to convince them, not confused, but convince them about the tragedy that's going to befall the boy in future. I could remember vividly in the last instance, the mother said, we are Christians. We are not idol worshippers. That particular conclusion let us understand something, that Africa has our own personal religion. Even when we were westernized, Christianity was brought to Nigeria. Something we need to come into conclusion, that Christianity, yes, was brought by the British. Also, we also are trying to promote and elevate our own traditional culture. So that particular thing, when you said the gods have something in their sleeves, I would say that no, the gods are just like, you know, someone there trying to watch out for us, someone there is trying to prevent some things that might happen to man in future. But Biago Diop, as a Biago artist, Chigozie Obioma in this story, is trying to take his mind, trying to just be in the arts, trying to be in the mind of our leaders in the past. No, he was not born during the Civil War. He was born after the Civil War. So trying to be in the arts, trying to see if our leaders, because when I look at that particular book, I realize that the father of Kunle was actually, like in the metaphor says, is actually the federal troop, while the mother of Kunle was actually the Biafran. So he was trying to come with a message to them that if you two guys can come together, trying to live harmony, trying to listen to the voice of the gods. But because we were westernized, that's why I started my analysis at the beginning, that the ideology of mental slavery causes huge damage in Nigeria during the Nigeria Civil War in 1967. Because, like I said earlier, the people did not know what they were fighting for. It was because they were actually, colonized, westernized, and also I made some research on about what really happened, what really led to that Nigeria Civil War, and I realized that in 1914, when Nigeria was amalgamated, that is the Northern Protectorate, the Southern Protectorate, and the Lagos Colony, when they were amalgamated in 1914, and in 1960, when we got our independence, the three regions, that is the three major regions, Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba, were divided. But the geographical landmass was given more to the northern. And even the period of the Nigeria Civil War, if you can remember very well, Yakubu Gowon spent almost like 9 years as the military government in Nigeria. That's actually give a sense of sidelining the Igbos. So if Nigeria were not forcefully amalgamated in 1914, truly Nigeria is a nation. We got our independence, and each region are independent in their
country or nation. No, this is important because 2 years ago, which year did we have on Darkling Plain as the thing? Last year. Labaf has a way of picking themes which survive the particular year. Ken Saro-Wiwa took that line from on Dover Beach, the poem. And here we are on a Darkling Plain where ignorance armies clash at night. And you are still going back to the thesis that, look, this thing was driven by ignorance and so on and so forth. But really, I will give you the reasons why I differ. In the back rooms, I'm coming back to it. In the back rooms, the lawyers on both sides were contesting about where the proceeds from the oil that was being extracted was to be domiciled. The problem was that both sides thought that it should come to them. And eventually it was resolved that the money should be kept in escrow so that neither side has access to those funds until the end of hostilities. The question I have for you, and I'm coming back to you, is that, yes, those young boys, 19, 20, that is how it is in most wars. That was how it was for the Vietnam War, which was fought almost contemporaneously. Their average ages were 17, 18, 19. But do you really think, are you still maintaining the thesis that they don't know what they are doing when in those back rooms somebody was trying to decide who gets what at the end of the day?
All right. Well, I'll still stand on my ground by saying yes, they don't know, because I'm going to reference something in the text. It's actually good to extract some lines, some excerpts from the text. Probably I should do that so that you'll be able to understand very well. Very sure. All right. Let me take from page 137. Let me take from page 137. All right, so if you look at this particular page where I'm going to read now, this is when the Biafran was actually having this kind of a setback in the world front, and they need aids. they need support. And here, in page 137, he said something, said, even Peter has faith. Listen, His Excellence has promised to bring more expert fighters from elsewhere, France, Germany, Italy, even America. Black Americans. 2 of them are even 14 battalion. They came all the way from America to help us. Now, this aspect let us understand something there is that our people, like I said, they are mentally colonized to the point that we fought ourselves ignorantly to the point that we need external aid. And if you remember in 1955, that's when we have London Conference, before Nigeria got independence. Few of our leaders in Nigeria actually went to London to discuss Nigeria independence that will be coming up in 1960. So my question is, if these leaders, the foreign aid, the France and the British, let's stay on the British, if they can actually call on to the 2 leaders from both ends, from the federal troop and from the Biafran troop, trying to settle this dispute amicably as we have done in 1955, this particular war wouldn't have even happened at all. So my conclusion is that the sense of naivety, where people tend to, convince mentally that you guys are actually different, you guys are not brothers. And Kule even said it in page, Kule even said it in page, when he was talking to one of his friends, he said it in, when, let me have it here, because I actually want to quote it from both. He said, we are now in the era where brothers fight brothers. What are we fighting for?
That is the definition of civil war. I'm coming back to you. I am intrigued by something that Chigozie tried to do in this book regarding, again, the role of the older women. You just spoke about the young women, women of childbearing age. Almost consistently on both sides of the conflict, the older women were invariably the voices of reason that tried to say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Whereas the men of that age, were either going to say, go and fight, or they were going to be indifferent. Why do you think that it appears that the only consistent, I mean, not to take away from anything you're going to say now, but the recent elections in America comes to mind. The black female vote has always gone one way from the time the women were able to vote in America. And I believe that they were the right group. They were the group that had their heads screwed on straight. But I'm going to ask you, since you said that women have agency and choice, why do you think the older women on both sides of the conflict always sued for peace?
I would say that's number one, because they have experiences, more experiences, and that's because they are older, of course. And also because I would not say women are for peace, but I would say they are older now. They don't have this youthful exuberance that the younger folks have. If they were younger, maybe they wouldn't have, wanted that, okay, let me bring it now to our current Nigerian situation. Whenever there is protests in the country, our mothers never let us go out. Our mothers, especially after the 2020, after what happened, the NSAS protest, on that night, I remember I was in my father's house. My mother was crying when I was showing her videos and all. Since then, like this, whenever there's protest in my school, my mother will call me from the home. Don't go out today, Mommy, I have class. Don't go out today, oh, there's protest, oh. Mommy, they are not shooting gun, but don't go out, sit down inside the house. Why? Because nobody wants to lose a child. Nobody wants chaos. Those older women knew that when there is chaos in town, Yoruba used to say one proverb that Tabasoko soja. It's
not that many to about. We actually know. we actually know that it's going to hit somebody in the house.
Exactly. So when the war started, who suffered from the war? The people suffered. Those who fought in the war lost people. They lost loved ones. In fact, they lost their lives. So the older women, I would call them the symbol of peace, maybe, that the book upheld. That this war does not only affect those who do not know about it, it also affects those behind it. So I'll just say that.
So what do you think accounts for society's failure to listen to those older women every time? It is almost as if society has decided that it's going to do something that will get people killed. Why do you think the older women need to be more militant in some fashion or form?
They don't have to be more militant. I think it's just natural. Youth want to show that they have more power. They want to show that they can be powerful. They can do things. They can, And there's also something that everybody has. Everybody wants their voice to be heard. Everybody, when anybody feels cheated, they feel like, no, I must say this thing. Even if they already know what is going to happen after doing it, they just want to show that, no, this person has to know that I do not agree with this thing. So I feel like it's not, they don't have, even if they are more militant about it, you can't tie, okay, if your son wants to go out for, African mothers can do it, but you can't force somebody to stay in one place if the person does not want to. You can try your best. You can only try your best. You can only give advices. You can only try to persuade, but you cannot force that person, because if you're forcing that person, you're also depriving the person of a right to voice their opinions, to be heard, and all that. So I think it's just natural among us human beings. We want to voice our opinions. We want our voices heard.
So you are saying that that equation is constant. Sorry, there are no children here. They say fuck around, find out. Just like America is about to do with Trump now. I got reading this book at short notice, so I had to read very fast. And I could see that Chigozie wanted to be different from the more realistic, I can say 90% of the Civil War novels were based in realism. He wanted to be different. He wanted to he wanted to give a voice to the dead. In fact, so much so that he would have one man who has one leg in the other world and one leg in this world. Do you think that that effort succeeded in this novel?
If the novel is not, like I've stated earlier, is not metaphysical, I would have said yes. It's based on vision that was seen by a seer. So I would say, because it's not realistic, not successful to some extent, because if this thing is practicalized in a movie, that's practicalized in a novel, that is, there's not someone seeing the vision or trying to take message from the gods. It actually happened from the beginning of the novel down to the end of the novel. I would have said, yeah, but okay, let's look at the character now. What else is Kunle, in some extent, the protagonist. If you want to use Kunle, that should be separated from the writer. Kunle as the major character in the novel, yes, to some extent, because Kunle actually had no attachments to the Biafran. If you remember at the beginning of the story,
the mother is Biafran.
The mother is Biafran, but in African cosmology, as we all understand that, even when the father, everything about the father dominates, in terms of religion, ethnicity, everything dominates over the child. So I would say, yeah, probably the mother is also from Biafran, but Kunle is not identified as a Biafran until when Kunle decided to travel to bring back his brother Tunde, when he encountered that this tragedy, which led him to be, unfortunately, a Biafran soldier. But when Kunle decided to leave the Biafran troop and visit his brother, that was when he had an encounter with Mobolaji. So the conversation Kunle had with Bolaji in the story made me realize that Chigozie Obioma tends to let us understand that people from the Biafran and people from the federal troop actually they are friends if they comes to terms in some agreements.
That is why it's a civil war.
That's so. So we can actually say that, and still reference that what I said earlier that it's just like a naivety. Someone is fighting for what they don't know. But Chigozie truly has succeeded by making Kunle to be like a balance between the Biafran and the federal troop.
So, you know, I saw Chigozie trying to do something that Chino Achebe had done in Things Fall Apart. When you are in trouble in your fatherland, you can take refuge and save your life by running to your motherland. And when he was arrested after his incursion using the Red Cross to enter Biafra, he quickly remembered that he had only one card left, and that was to say, but my mother is from here. It's, like I said, I find I know it's not the same thing, but I'm saying that the female factor is capable of saving your life sometimes. And both Achebe and Obioma tried to leverage on that. That is not to say that women are always nice people, though. Because we have found out, yes, and this is a known historical fact, that women are as capable of killing generals as every other man. And they have actually killed more generals. Oh, yes. So we know. We are not trying to say you are very nice people. In fact, if I have the floor, I will say to every young man, you're more like all my friends, all my friends growing up were people of my grandmother's age, which made me like the misfit in my own, and they always had one thing that they always say, women know how to, you have violence, that's the only way you know how to kill. Women can give you something that will kill you in 10 years, and you'll be running around thinking you're alive. you know, there's that film, Him Dead, Him Don't Even Know It. That happens. But going back to what the intertextuality that Chigozie Obioma tried to pull off in this book, which I think is interesting because not only does it do it with Achebe, he tries to do it with elements from Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, Victor Hugo, The Miserable Ones, and so on and so forth. And I think it's ambitious. I think we need more writers to be that ambitious in their reach. However, don't you think that at the same time, he's run into the rut of exoticism, of putting the black man in that space of somebody who is always controlled by something that he cannot see, but which he must always obey?
That is using Kunle, right?
Yes.
Yes, using Kunle as
the protagonist.
Yes, using the protagonist Kunle as.
Where is Kunle's agency? I'm sorry, but to me, it's almost like the man was an automaton. An undergraduate who does not know that there is a war going on, and who walks into belligerent territory thinking that wearing a Red Cross jacket will save him, who does not speak the language, and so on and so on. I want you to help us understand what you think is really the objective of Chigozie in this.
All right. Objectively, let me say that this is a fiction, so the authors has the right to, pull off different kind of arts and saying Just for example, I wrote similar story to, I titled the book, The Third Troop, just about scenarios. Now I've read about 3 Civil War books. So I think 2 months ago before I read this book. So I believe that objectively, if you're looking at the tragedy of Kunle in the story, it's just for me to understand that. But I don't want to agree with the authors too, to the extent that as an undergraduate, you don't know what's going around you. I don't want to agree, but because it's fiction, so let's say it's true. Because it's fiction, let's just accept like that. Because even in Nigeria right now, the current situations, what's happening in Kaduna, I know what is going on. What's happening even in America, all over the world. So it is something evidential. But as a result of the fact that then there was no digital media, mass media, something that can actually spread the news widely like that, then we can give it to the author that Kunle can actually be an ignorant personnel in the story who just walk around, be an undergraduate. But the problem of walking direct into the enemy's trap, that is the Biafran troop, was for we to understand that in this country, nowhere is safe. Nowhere actually is safe. You know, something can happen all of a sudden, and we can just walk directly into the trap. But however, even if Kunle is not ready to disclose his identity as being part of the Biafran, that is from his mother's side. If you remember the conversation the Major Amadi had with Kunle, the first conversation was not about which states, which one do you belong to. It's about, are you ready to fight for us? So I believe it is more about nationality and identity, whereby do you belong to us or you die. So everybody's trying to save their own background. Everybody's trying to save their own territory. You can't come in as a spy. If you are coming as a spy, we kill you, or you come in to fight for us. So in a case where there is a war in the country like Nigeria in 1967, Obiaman is telling us one thing. It is either you fight against your country or you die.
So, you know, I am coming. No. I'm coming to her with the denouement, the conclusion, which is neither male nor female. Because I have not yet asked the question. Oh, how long do I have? No, seriously, how long do I have? Okay. So, I saved the big question of the conclusion or the denouement for you. I believe that men can start out stupid, like Kunle started out in this novel. But I believe that how people end up is more important than how they started. And the theme for this year is hope. Where do you think hope lies in this discourse that Chigozie is trying to make us look into?
Thank you for that question. Firstly, I would start with the fact that, if you agree with me, that the book is a bildungsroman novel.
I have a problem with that characterization. Bildungsroman is coming of age. Is a 20-year-old still coming of age?
Okay, coming of age, not in the literal way now.
Not in the literal way, yes. Okay.
Yeah, because
I agree with you.
Okay. Adekunle was immature when he went into the war. The war taught him. The war helped him grow. It was during the war he became a father. It was during the war he
became a man.
A man, yeah, so to speak. He became a man during the war. He grew, he got to know what pain, actual pain felt like. He got to know what loss meant. So I feel like Adekunle grew through the novel, and coming back to where hope lies, I think the first instance of hope in the novel is hope as a coping mechanism. Almost every character in this novel, especially Felix, had hope until the end, especially Felix. Felix had hope until the end. The hope he had helped him cope through the war. He celebrated every win of the Biafran. He said, and he mourned every loss. Every loss. So the hope he had helped him, you know, it helped him survive. And I would come back again to unity. One thing I noticed while reading the book is that even if there was war, there was still unity among the Biafran and Nigerian troop. And that's because of the fact that the Biafran and Nigerian troops at some point, they shared foods, they played games together on the war front, but not at the battlefront, actually. But then there was a war ongoing. You both were fighting against yourselves.
There was attack trade.
There was, exactly. And behind the scenes, you are eating together. You bring food for me from Nigeria. I will eat it to my Biafran brothers. We play games together. It means that they know that they are still brothers, even if their leaders make them fight on the battlefront. And also,
so you think that is something to hope, that's something to hold on to as an element of hope?
A little bit, but then let me come back to Adekunle going to Biafra. Adekunle Aromere identifies as a Yoruba boy. He understands Yoruba, he speaks Yoruba fluently, but knows nothing about the Igbo language, does not understand it, he can't speak it. So Adekunle going into the Biafran nation is it explores the author actually is trying to explore the fact that anybody can still be, can choose how to identify. The leaders want us to identify separately, but individually, you can choose what you want to be, who you want to be. I understand that when Adekunle went into Biafra, it was not his choice. He didn't want to join the army, he was forced to. But as time went on, he realized that he wanted to be there. He did not want to leave. The aim of him going into Biafra was not to fight the war, was to find his brother, because he had always felt this, this anger in him and this guilt in him that it caused the misfortune of his brother, his crippled brother. But him going there to fight a war helped him realize that he had more to live for. It helped him realize that even his country, that is Nigeria, because his father is Yoruba, and so he identifies as Yoruba, even his country, that is Nigeria, is doing a wrong to the Biafran nation. So it helped us, the author just, I don't know how to put this, but let me put it this way. The author shows that through the lens of somebody that was not actually Biafran, the author shows what unity meant, like what individual opinion or individual freedom of identity felt like. So,
you know, it's interesting that you touched upon something I was going to ask a follow-up question upon. He went into Biafra territory twice. The first time as an ignorant boy, undergraduate. The second time as a man who knew what was what and who had actually fought, who had engaged. But my question to you now is, you know, the constant, the refrain in the aftermath of cessation of hostilities was happy survival, happy survival, happy survival. Don't you think that, how many years later now? 1970, January 15th, that was this official cessation of hostilities. Don't you think that Nigerians and Nigeria is still saying happy survival, happy survival, happy survival each time we see each other?
Okay, okay. Let me read. There's this part of the book towards the end.
Because you wanted to know where the hope lies. And Chigozie is a nasty, nasty character. He says you are surviving. He doesn't say you are thriving. But you should celebrate the survival. No, that's the point. You know, a novelist has different ways of getting the message across. But the one thing that it makes everybody say is happy survival. Yeah. Yes.
Before I read this paragraph, I would ask a question. And the question is, have we actually survived the Civil War?
Good question. Good question. Great question. Great question. Great question. Great question.
Okay, let me read this part. Life is, okay, I think it's Baba Igbala speaking here. Life is like earth, soil. You never know what you will dig up. Only Ifa and Orumila can see, can know. Let me tell you, 50 or even 20 years from now, the children of those men dead in the fields, who may not know or witness what you and your friends have been through, might again resort to this. So, my deduction from this paragraph is that the author predicts another civil war in Nigeria. Because to date, there's still tribalism. We still fight ourselves. If anything happens somewhere, they'll say, who did it? Who did it? It is wrong. If we keep doing that, if we keep tagging ourselves by our tribes, saying, in fact, there's something I've been seeing recurrently these days. If you want to rent an apartment, especially in Lagos, the landlord will say, if the landlord, especially the Yoruba landlords, only Yoruba tenants. I've seen it very well. Only Yoruba tenants. They will signify that they only want Yoruba tenants. What are we trying to do? We are trying to break unity. So I actually do not think we have survived the Civil War.
You have made a very significant point. So, when does the Civil War come to an end? Why? When? We know that on paper, official cessation of hostilities was January 15, 1970. But between you and I, when does the Civil War really come to an end?
Okay, I would love to read.
Yes, because
I would love to
Chigozie attempts to answer that question.
Yes, I actually love to read next chapter here. I believe I can get it on time. It's actually, okay, I think, yes, I'm here. It says, I talk one Nigerian, the Biafran soldier says, I talk Na lie, walai. The officer slaps the Biafran soldiers across the face. Idiot, shege bansa. Shebi your eye don dey pan. Carry your gun, come fight again now. The Civil War does not end. This was after there was an agreement between the federal troop and the Biafran to come to a kind of a solution. So which means the Civil War does not end. Let me quickly just contribute to the question you asked about where does the hope lies in this story. I will emphasize on the birth of Kunle's child. Agnes actually lost hope after she lost her husband and her first son. But when she met Kunle during the war, she lost the hope. She just wants to retaliate. She just wants to let people realize that, okay, something has happened to me, and I'm ready to take blood for blood from the federal troop. But when she gave birth to a girl, that was the resuscitation of a hope. Hope to Kunle. And if you remember when Agnes was pregnant, Kunle prevented Agnes from going to the war front because he realized that this is the hope. This is a new face. This is what can actually bring love. So my conclusion from
survivor.
So my conclusion from that angle is that that particular people lost their hope, but the birth of a new child. And if you remember truly, in fact, something happened in the story that I want to give a credit to Mr. Chigozie Obioma. That was when Kunle went to Agnes' family. I was expecting the Agnes family, that is Agnes' parents, to kill Kunle, arrest him, But after the death of Agnes, do not forget that there was this kind of a ritual that was conducted for Kunle.
It's called War We Read.
Just to bring, despite the fact that they come from two different ethnic groups. I know the name is Kunle Aromire. They heard the name. But yes, the war is still going on, but they're ready to come into agreement. So the birth of the girl brings the Biafran from Agnes and Kunle from Federal Troop together as a new face.
Thank you very much. But I have one final question, because you accused me of not asking difficult questions from the learned lady. The question I want to ask you is perhaps the hardest. And I reserved it for you because I know you will know the answer. We run the risk of this insidious binarism when it comes to civil wars, to say it's the federal troops and the Biafras, or it's the Yoruba and in this novel, the Yoruba and the Igbo. But the truth of the matter is that it's a much more complicated business. Did you notice the map at the beginning of this book? Yes. It's interesting because there are many, up to 50-something books about the Nigerian Civil War, of which about 20-something are novels, but this is one of the very few that has the map of Biafra. Do you think Biafra, according to that map, is coming back?
That's a very tough one.
According to that map, like Soyinka said, Biafra is a state of mind. Even me, I'm a Biafran, so. But according to that map.
According to that map, if Biafra comes back, I think it deserves it. Because looking at this map, all the Biafran states are united. They are all together, and Biafran fighting for
By
secession.
which you mean contiguous?
Yes.
But geographically contiguous, not culturally or ethnographically contiguous. So, okay, you can continue.
Okay. So if Biafran comes back, one, it deserves it. And Biafra wanting secession, honestly, I really do not think it's a bad thing. I'll give my reason for saying that. Look at the example I gave earlier. That imagine an Igbo person or a Biafran person wanting accommodation so badly in Lagos, and you find 10 apartments, and they tell you that they only want Yoruba occupants. How is that person supposed to feel? We are the ones causing tribalism. If Biafra is never going to happen, it means tribalism stops. Defining people by their ethnic groups stops. It means nepotism stops. It means we see ourselves as equals, as brothers, regardless of our tribes, regardless of where we come from. I think that is the only time we can have an actual one Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Last question, last comment, last observation on the map. Specifically on the map.
I don't want to believe that Chigozo Bioma intentionally put a map here to support the
come
Biafran.
on. An author never makes a mistake with something like that.
I'm just saying that. I say I don't believe that he intentionally put it there to support. That is to complete my statement.
No, not to support. But
not to support. So if the map is there, it's not because of his supporting the Biafran or hoping that the Biafran will come back. It's just for way to let us hear from the Biafran perspectives. And if you notice very well, Kunle, the real war started, just like after 3 paragraphs, Kunle traveled to immediately. So which means the entire story here centers in Biafran. So I believe the essence of the map here is just for we to hear from the perspectives of the people, not from the Biafran, but actually from the federal person, from Nigerian, who traveled to Biafran and had that kind of heinous experience, because Kunle, when Kunle went to Biafra, Republic of Biafra, he can tell a lot of what really faced. The only thing I believe Obima did not fully display in the novel is because whenever he gets to the war front, because his vision, probably because his illusion, we just end the story there. Then the following day,
the bullets are not something from a vision. No, the bullets are real.
You know, so the essence of the map is just for we to hear directly from the Biafran. If you read Festus CI Heroes, we have both from the federal troop and from the Biafra. It's like 50-50. But here, basically from the Biafran. But
okay.
A bit towards the end, a bit from the federal
Authorial
troop.
license. I will be remiss in my duties as moderator if I do not give the audience a chance to ask a question or two. Do we have anyone who has a question and observation? Yes, I'm interested in the question you want to ask.
Well, thank you for all your comments. I've read the book. I read the book probably 6 months ago or so. I think that the conversation about whether there was inevitability or not, we can do that not just by looking at the book, but also looking at the historical context. Because the war did not just erupt. There were social, political, ethnic issues there, in which it is difficult to actually ascribe innocence to any ethnic group, not to the East, not to Biafra, not to the Federal, not to the Yorubas, not to anybody. There's enough blame to go around. So I think that is the context in which you will put the metaphysical construct of whether the novel, whether it was inevitable or whether it's not inevitable, why there was agency, why there was no agency, and so on and so forth. Those things have to put in the context of real historical happenings in the 1960s, especially after the fall of the Western region, during the crisis between Awolowo and Akintola, and all the things that happened and led to Nzogu's coup. It is in the context of that, and then the pogrom that happened, and then the accusation against Ironsi about his trying to create a Nigeria for the Igbos, and the one-sided accusation of the coup, and all of those things came in. So I think that was what was going on in Obioma's mind in trying to say, did we have to fight this war, or did we not have to fight this war? Because the two parents there are actually from both sides. Kunle's parents are from both sides. And Kunle goes to war, goes there ironically, not for war, but for love. He's also somebody whose heart has been broken. Her heart was for the lady that fell for his own brother. So that you can see the tension going on. I think that it was a nice thing that he did to bring all of that out. And I think for most part, what the novel tells us is that in spite of all that you guys have said about hope, I didn't see any hope at the end of that. I didn't see. Even the old woman, the last old woman in that novel said what? Hail Biafra. She's defied, although it was not, he didn't want the soldiers to see. No, she said it loud, but not loud enough for the soldiers to hear. She said it. But it shows you that there was really broken hope, and he's writing from retrospect. It's not writing as though, it's not like Achebe who wrote A Man of the People, and then there was, other people said that after all, even when he was writing, coups had already started in Africa, so there was so much of vision. Yeah. No. Sometimes we give credit and we can ask questions. You know, sometimes you think a prophet saw something, I didn't see it. You know, so that is the fact. Yeah. No. Don't give credit. You can only question the prophet. The prophet is not, just like we can question this prophet. This prophet probably was innocuous. The agency was there, the human beings were there. Was it the prophet that asked the boy to play the ball across the yard and for him to go and get an accident? What has that got to do with him going to the other side? And what would have happened if those things did not happen? Would we have married the girl? We don't know. So I think that those things are happening. There is this author who wrote The Sympathizer, Nguyen, who said wars are fought on two battlefronts, in two ways. I fought twice, sorry. Say one on the battlefront and the other one in memory. So that means that the war, the battle, the issues of the Civil War were never resolved when it ended. And that is why there is still agitation for it. But then if the agitation for it grew after Jonathan, really strong after Jonathan. So sometimes don't see any innocence about the battle for Biafra. Because the battle for Biafra is probably about what do I want to get in the national cake. If I don't get it, then I go to my tribe. And the one you said about landlords and so on, it's not only the Yorubas that are guilty of it. So it's not only the Yorubas that are guilty of it. Yorubas are guilty of it. Every ethnic group is guilty of it. Every ethnic group, in fact, in this country, when somebody becomes president, he takes his own people. When the other person takes his own president, he takes his own people. When Jonathan was there, people were saying, Niger Delta people and Igbos were just taking everything. And Buhari got there. They say the Igbos were quiet that time, during Jonathan. When Buhari got there, the man has given everything to Hausa. Now a Yoruba man is there that complains that the Yorubas are there. So it is a national problem. It's not, so sometimes when you read books like this, you should also put it in the context of the whole national conversation. Because somebody else can write a counter novel. I have written one on the Civil War. And it may not even tell you, it might take a different tack from Chigozie. Thank you.
Good evening, sirs and mass. I'm looking at this thing from the metaphysical point of view. That the Civil War will end when the gods are tired of the drama. The drama. And that drama is that drama is that the gods usually use human beings to cause trouble. And I'm very confident that the gods always cause trouble. Now, they built a country, or they created a country where the British were interested in putting people together that are not supposed to be put together. Now, I read a book, North and South, about the American Civil War. There is a man there, one of the American people that told us the solution or the problem of Nigeria. He said that among the slaves that he had seen, that book was about slavery, the Civil War, that the Igbo man is the most stubborn person among the slaves that are coming from Africa. That when an Igbo man has an opportunity to escape, he will escape or he will kill himself. Now, how do you put somebody from the north and somebody from the east? The person from the east does not believe in kowtowing to somebody who doesn't have the intelligence that he has. How do you now put them together and think that there will be peace? There will come a time when the gods will be tired of this drama and they will make us be tired of each other, that we cannot be a country again. That let the Igbos go on their own, let the Yorubas be on their own. Maybe that is the time when they are tired of the drama. Now let me tell you something a little bit about the drama. The drama, it has always been there from the beginning. Now, they say God created earth. Now he put a fruit there, or a tree there, that if you eat this tree, you will cause trouble. He now said, somebody now came, who has been created thousands of years before Adam and Eve. How will he not be able to deceive Adam and Eve? That was where the problem of the world started. Another one was Esau and Jacob. He said, Esau I hate, Jacob I love. And we now gave Jacob the usurper or the cheat the power to overthrow. So I think that the gods have control over everything. And the whole world is a kind of drama to entertain the gods. And it is when they are tired of entertaining themselves at one point or other that they will solve the problem. Thank you.
One last question. Please, yes. One last question. Oh, okay. Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Make it short because we have 2 more questions online.
Okay, no problems. So, good evening, everyone. I think yesterday when we were having a session, a panel discussion session, a man seated there, he said something. He said, or a woman, she said, we are so interested in the past and we are not focused on the future. And he said something regarding the amount of books that we have regarding the Civil War. He said we have over 50 books, right? So I think we should try to see how we can walk away from the Civil War and create a solution to what we are doing, to what we are facing now. So what I will say is that we need to first accuse the people that caused this, which we all know, the people that caused this. Then secondly, we need to go back to what will work for us.
Well, you want us to work forward now?
Yes, I want us to work forward. That's what we are doing. We are correcting ourselves from what caused the problem. We already know what caused the problem. We know that this is what caused the problem. Then we want to move away from the problem by accusing those people first. Secondly, like he said, we move back to the different sections, this different segment, the protectorates, the Yorubas one side, the Northern House one side, the Eastern House one side. Because this thing, this is one Nigeria, yes, but it can't work because, I don't know how I'm going to explain it, because the Northern, okay, look at the aspect of...
Are you in the Kole work group?
Sir? No, what I'm trying to say is that, okay, look at the aspect of when they are trying to share the bill that was passed recently, that they want every man to reap from their labor, like section.
Tax reform bill?
Yeah, no, not regarding the tax reform. Okay, that's the tax reform. Okay, that every section will be giving their own revenue. They will be giving their own something based on their revenue. So, isn't that better for us? But now the Northern has don't want to access because they don't have much way to generate revenue.
Actually,
okay,
you are wrong. Because the minerals,
yes, sir.
The problem is how to find which mineral is not in the north. There are so many minerals in the north.
Okay, but I can state that we are now in Ewekoro, in Ogun State, we have limestone. In Osun State, we also have gold. In Ekiti, we have rice plantation. So these things can actually work here. In the east, we have the crude oil that can also work for us.
Your point is taken. Your point is taken. We need to sit down and think about this. That's your point.
Yes, sir. That's my point. That we need
Thank
to
you
move
very
away
much.
from it. Yes, sir.
All right. No, there are questions online. Okay. I'm told that Professor Adeshoko is online. Professor Awamankwa is online. We can't see them. Where is the technical? Osaze? I thought. Okay, maybe they don't have questions. But, gentlemen, yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My submission or thought is that the birth of Biafra is directly equal to the death of Nigeria. The reason I say this is because Biafra is, somebody mentioned, it's an ideological thought that if I can go to my root, the problems that face me in front will be solved. And if we look at people or countries that have done this, it has not solved it for the, give example, the USSR that has broken into Russia, Ukraine, what's going on today, Russia and Ukraine, is a fallout of this thirst for independence and so on and so forth. So my thought, when Emeka Ojukwu was asked after the war, and I'm speaking as his representative, David Ojukwu, they asked him, that war, what was and do you think it brought what you wanted? He says, I don't regret doing that war, but if we do it again, then we have not learned the lessons that the war brought for us. So that's my thought.
Thank you very much. One last question. Oh. I'm told we are very much behind time, so a minute each.
Good evening. I would like to say my name is Chief Nwere. I'm from Imo State, so I'm Igbo.
So we can see you.
Me, I just came out of a naval warship. I'm tired, though. So, if you really read the true story, why there was the declaration of Biafra, it was because of the events, the massive genocide that was going on in the north. When they saw the first coup by Nzogu and his counterparts as being an Igbo coup, not Nigerian army officers getting rid of corrupt politicians, but they saw it as an Igbo coup against the north. And then things escalated from there, and tens of thousands of people were being slaughtered. Igbos were slaughtering in the north. So they were asked to return to the east, and in the process of returning to the east, Biafra was declared. Now, let's not forget also the Abori agreements in Ghana. There was some kind of understanding that things should be settled in a very peaceful manner, whereby there won't be any war, but both sides must compromise on ideologies and on the way forward. And as far as Gabon is concerned, he came back, consulted with his consultants, and he broke the agreement. So nobody wants to go to war, and definitely not a minority like the Igbo minority. You know, you had one minority, you had one tribe going to war with 200 ethnic groups. Definitely, you can never, one ethnic group cannot defeat 200 ethnic groups. So it wasn't about so much winning the war, it was about standing the ground. It was a statement. It was like, we will not take it anymore, and we're standing our ground.
Survival.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm told we're very much behind time, but I want you to give a round of applause to the panelists. And I want us to take every book on the Nigerian Civil War that we can find as one more missing piece in the jigsaw puzzle that is our country. Thank you very much. You've been a lovely audience.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much, Barrister Tade Badiola, for that beautiful moderation, and equally to Kunle, Firebrand, Kunle, and Timilane. Please, let's appreciate them one more time. And just before you take your seat, we'd like to, of course, observe our protocol here. We'll be having a group photograph with you, and to do that, on behalf of Kora, is the Chief Chairman, Kora Board of Trustees, Chief Kayode Aderinoko. Equally, I'd like to call on Sir. Could you please join us to the stage, sir? Thank you very much. And I don't know if the Secretary General is still here. The Kora Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Akion Shosa, we need you on stage. Very quickly, we'll be diving into the next panel discussion, which is also exciting. And the panelists, I understand, are already seated. So we'll just move on without any delay. And it's book trek, right here at the Kongi Harvest Gallery, readings and conversations around one of the books titled Behind the Doors of Faith by Prince Unduka Alom, published by Grand Touch Media Services Ltd. Thank you very much. We also have the one from Bugboe Obaya 2023. I know he's been here. Fired up to hold you spellbound. Mr. Obaya is here. Equally here is Mr. Henry Akubiro, who is the art editor, the Sun newspaper. His book is Yam Tarawala, the Warrior King, long-listed and shortlisted last year for the Nigerian Prize for Literature. We equally have this fiction called Nigeria, The Struggle for Democracy by Adewale Majapie, published by Penguin Random House, UK. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about time we constitute the next panel discussion. I'm talking about the Nigerian Civil War. I do believe that the conversations continue. Okay, I have been made to understand that Olakunle Fadairo is coming back here to moderate this panel discussion. And just go before that interruption, I was talking about the Nigerian Civil War from the perspective of a so-called minority, because I do have the belief that, you know, when two elephants fight, the grass will suffer. Minorities who constitute, a huge number of the nation and basically carrying the nation on the head. You know, they do not even have mouth to say what they experienced. You know, both ways. So that is it. And I also have the conviction that the best people to tell the story of what really transpired during that ignoble experience, you know, are the minority people, the minorities who are within that, you know, the Middle Belt and the Niger Delta. So going forward, I'll just call on the panelists who are ready to go, beginning from Prince Unduka Alom, the author of Behind the Doors of Faith. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Prince Unduka. We can do better than that. You're welcome, sir. Sit. We have Mr. Obaya. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make welcome Mr. Obaya. You're welcome. Yes, Obaya Halim. Exactly. Yes, Obaya Halim. That's the name. Don't mind the people that wrote this one here. Okay. Mr. Henry Akubiro, he's been waiting. Please, over here, sir. We're happy to have you on ground. And Kule, I hope you are ready. Good to go. All right. Father, over to you. And I do have that implicit faith in you to have to be able to elicit responses from this group of fantastic writers and literary activists. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Father Olakunle, so I'll be moderating this session, Book Trek. Session by Miss Kelani Messi, and the Book Trek is to educate young writers, majority Nigerians about social issues around us. Books that we'll be discussing today center more on the political, social, and psychological issues in Nigeria. So, welcome, sir, Mr. Henry Akubiro and Prince for the session. Before we start, I will first and foremost try to ask Prince Unduka, Dr. Prince Unduka, about a few questions about his book. While I was reading your book, I noticed that the centerpiece or the theme of the book revolves around the woman, especially this issue of, gender discrimination in Nigeria. My question I have here, because actually I had concerns about writers, precisely the main writers who write about feminist work. So first question I have for you is, what is your view on the reaction of the people to the societal activities and social vices? For example, in Nigeria now, when you write about the issues going on in gender discrimination, what is your view? Do you have this kind of, a changed view of why we have these consistent issues, previously to the traditional experience that we have in Nigeria? Because this book is actually a contemporary book. So why now?
While growing up as a Nigerian, now you learn that from the churches, sexuality, the role of women in retrospective, especially as a child, I grew up thinking that Jacob, and you wonder why he had no daughters. The same thing happens with Adam and Eve. The same thing happens with the children of Jacob. He had 12 sons. What about the daughters? Nobody mentions them. So the stereotype in storytelling has been fashioned in such a way that women's opinion, they are meant to be seen but not to be heard. So as a writer, I will say that some of the things that inspired me is that there's a passage I always read that said, when I was a child, I thought like a child. And that was why I thought Jacob had only 12 sons. But when I became a man, I began to question traditions that I couldn't understand. I began to question, is it true that in Genesis chapter 2, they talk about the woman being created from the woman? But in chapter 1, it said that God created man, male and female. He made them. Where did the division start? Who relegated the women? How come other animals, they don't talk about gender issues? How come in some passages in the Bible, nobody mentions about the great women that worked in the ministry of Jesus? It's only Luke. All the other people, the Jews, Matthew, Mark, none of them talked about the women that were financially empowering his ministry. It's only when Luke came that he now discovered that there were a lot of women that were the foundation to Jesus' ministry, but none of them were celebrated. So storytelling has been biased against women. Storytelling talks about the magnitude of the man without mentioning the help that has come from the woman. Most of the time, you wonder, how come when the Bible talks about Adam needing help, when you talk about help, somebody who can help you is someone who knows one more than you. Your helper is not a servant. So most times, when I begin to reason about it, I now discover that there are lots of potentials created and embedded in the women, but we have been working so hard to subdue it. So it is time we try to tap into these potentials. It is time we give the girl child equal opportunity to express himself in the society. I'll stop so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please a round of applause for him, please. For the women in the house, it is time to recognize. Mr. Area Kuburo, your work dated back to 16th century. Why now? Is there issue that was not resolved in 16th century that you try to bring back? Or you feel like it is time to revisit what happened in the past?
Thank you very much for the question. Tarawala, the Warrior King is a drama play. It's a play I wrote. It was informed by what happened in the 16th century. I discovered this the storyline by accident. I read a book, A History of Bill, written by Dr. Buka Usman, who was the former permanent secretary in the presidency and also the current president of Nigerian Folklore Society. So he wrote about Biu, his place. Biu is an emirate in Borno State. But the story dated back to the 16th century because when I read that story, I saw Kanem Empire because Kanem Empire was one of the biggest empires in the ancient times. And I felt justice had not been done to that storyline. If you look at Nigerian literature, drama, you read about Benin Empire, Obaron Nogbaisi, you read about Moremi in Yoruba, you read about Queen Amina, but there's no such thing except what Ahmed Yoruba wrote on Atahiru, based on Kanem Empire. But this one is a society that had a relationship with not just what is present day in Nigeria, but also Yemen, with Egypt, with Chad, with Cameroon, with Niger. So I try to weave that history together, especially the trial of man. When you are faced with adversity, when your right has been trampled upon, how do you react? And also, that story specifically has to do with leadership tussle between two princes in Kanem Borno Empire, Omar and Abdullahi, over right of succession, who was going to be the next king of Kanem Borno Empire. The younger one eventually became the king of Kanem Borno Empire, ahead of his elder one, Abdullahi, who happens to be Yamtarawala. Because it was said that his mother came from Yemen. She was a prince in Yemen, and she was married in Kanem. So when it was time to elect the new king of Kanem Borno Empire, the oracle, they divined and found out that he was a stranger in their midst. So he left, he was denied of his right as the king of Kanem Borno. So he now embarked on a journey to found his own kingdom. And that was how he founded Biu, and also it became also a formidable empire in those days that consisted of Yobe, parts of Adamawa, parts of Yobe State, Borno, and the immediate environment. So I was trying to do justice to that history that has not been told in Nigerian literature, and celebrate a culture that we are not used to reading about, we are not used to seeing in Nigerian literature.
Thank you. A round of applause for him, please. I remember vividly in secondary school, this thing was actually discussed yesterday regarding what's going on in institutions, secondary school in Nigeria, where history has been taken away from the curriculum of the secondary school students. You know, to be honest, I got to know this history also before I read your book in 2011 about Kanem Borno, but we stopped in first, I remember first term. In the second term, Lagos State stopped this history as a curriculum for the secondary school students. So my knowledge stopped at the introduction to this story. So thank you very much for that briefing. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, to you. When I read your book, I realized that it actually started from Lagos slum to American, I think African diaspora. Why? Why that transition? And what is the brain behind that knowledge?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Obanya Halim. You said Obanya Halim. And the book is titled Gbogboe. It's spelled G-B-O, a bit of space, or if you prefer, you can have the E with the accent above and below. So the book actually is a sequel to a book I'd written much earlier, titled Ijambodi. Ijambodi is your proverbial slum But this slum is a slum with a difference, because it's a slum that is like a microcosm of the country. We're a multifarious country with varying ethnicities, and in the slum, you will find varying ethnicities competing. And it was set during the Abacha period. So we're looking at about 24 years ago, under Abacha, when Abacha, who was our leader then, the military leader, decided that he was going to run this country by hook or by crook. And he had 5 political parties, all angling for him. But fortunately, fate had it that he had to go in 1998. So the story, this one, Ajambody, is based in 1998. So leap forward to roughly about 12 years later. That's when you have Bogboe. The protagonist and the antagonist and the contagonist are all located and situated again in Bogboe. They were the enablers. Aside from the protagonist, the rest were enablers of the Abacha thinking, in which Nadeko was seen as a problematic institution or community or society. Now we have Bogboe, and in Bogboe, you see the transition of these seeming Nigerian archetypes into a broader space. And in telling the story, I'm running parallels at the same time of the contradictions that make us who we are. There are quite a number of contradictions. And these contradictions are dwelt in within universal themes. So you're likely to find a bit of, you're likely to find community, you're likely to find violence, you're likely to find understanding, you're likely to find misunderstanding, you're likely to find tribalism, you're likely to find liberation of the mind. And the protagonist is a principled person, somebody who thinks, who believes a lot in the environment. He asks African questions to get African answers. He doesn't look at his environment through the prism of the West. Everything that he does is seen from the prism of what he thinks are the positive values of the past. So in a sense, we have the Hegelian notion of thesis and antithesis, you know, and to that extent, it's a syncretism. It's the fleshing of a new idea, which has a background in a very positive value that has aided us in the past, which we have forgotten about. And that positive value is an aesthetic that has aided us in the past very well in fractals. I don't know if anyone here has heard about fractals. You know, fractals as a way of understanding an environment was a typical tool used by our ancestors as part of our indigenous knowledge system to make a way forward in the political spheres, in the social spheres, in our art, even the way we governed ourselves. Nothing was too big or nothing was too small to be understood if you use the fractal. Lately, it has become a major line of learning, a key learning now. I mean, what you're calling computer knowledge stem from Africa. I mean, the early roots of the binary code, 0, 1, before mathematicians like the German, Leibniz, took it all up, all came from here. And it was all part of our understanding and study of nature around us. Our forefathers were the ultimate scientists. So all that is in Bogboe. And to that extent, it represents the force of light versus the force of darkness. So it's a major play that even foreigners are involved in.
Thank you, sir. Please, a round of applause for him, please. Dr. Prince, I'm going to read a line from your book. It said, I used to hear people say poverty is a curse, but I could tickle down to this level. In this contemporary society, actually I've witnessed this actually personal, to be honest, it's personal to an experience I had 15 years ago in my village where a lady was forced into the marriage because the family was actually going through some financial instability. And this scenario that happened 15 years ago caused this woman to have 4 kids for 4 different fathers. So, are you narrowing down the essence of gender discrimination, domestic violence, forced marriage, early marriage, to the effects of poverty?
Exactly. A great percentage of the early marriage, a great percentage of people who are forced into early marriage is actually as a result of poverty. I used to wonder, how come of all the people, Jesus Christ himself will say the poor will always be among you? Initially, I didn't understand that until I began to understand that poverty is a state of the mind. It's not actually a financial issue. He said, Job said, the things I greatly feared has come upon me. So whatever you do not accept cannot happen to you. The girl child that there is in this story saw the challenge. The very first time she mentioned to the mother that she wanted to become a lawyer, the mother actually said, Alapotakwanam, do not expose me. Like, how could you think about that? So the mother already had that state of mind of poverty that there is no way the husband will leave the male children and send you to university. So her only option was to get married and then hope that eventually, if you marry a well-to-do man, he might eventually send you to school. That is why you see many ladies in the universities at their later stage, because they couldn't go to school earlier. They were forced to go into this marriage contract that eventually the husband, willingly or unwillingly, will pretend that you have to have some children first so that the contract is sealed, because once he allows you to go to university, you might escape. You might come out and then start claiming it's no longer your class. So he wants to tie you down. And the moment he has tied you down, then he can now release you bit by bit, and then you'll be monitored, and then you'll be suspected of sleeping around with the lecturers, you'll be suspected of flirting around with the boys. It becomes a problem. But the major point is that poverty is a state of the mind. And once you reject it, if you accept it, it will happen to you. If you reject it ab initio and work towards it, you see, everything works together for good, the bad, and the ugly. And nature works in synchrony with our mindset. So whatever your mindset accepts becomes a big factor, a limiting factor to the things you can achieve.
Oh, thank you, sir. Please, a round of applause for him, please. Now, sir, let's narrow this down to see your question. Let's narrow this down. In this contemporary society we have now, apart from the financial instability in search for money, we have some scenario where parents force their children to early marriage, even when they finish their first degree. For example, half of a yellow son, after the girl finished her first degree, the father is ready to match the girl to one chief in the community. Yes. Now, what kind of intuition do you have in that? Are we still looking at the influence of the tradition, or we are still looking at the state of mental poverty?
In this case, it has nothing to do with tradition. Most times, what we call tradition are just customs things we see others do. And any tradition you do not understand, please question it. Most of the time, the parents are more interested in creating alliances. You know, they say, "Ogo buchonye," that your in-law is like a god to you. When you get a good in-law, a wealthy in-law that is well connected, the parents feel that this is a visa to prosperity. He feels that by giving away the daughter, he will now be able to attract the in-law to help him train the other children. The in-law might be ashamed of his house and he'll be forced to build a house for him. The in-law might see that he has been trekking all this while and then bless him with a car. So these are more or less political alliances, just like Solomon. The moment Solomon became king, what did he do? He went and married the daughter of Pharaoh, the greatest enemy to Israel. So if Pharaoh becomes my in-law, then my problems are solved. I can face the little Philistines and other people around, and if anybody attacks me as Solomon, Pharaoh will come to my aid. So these are the things that we do, and we tend to call them tradition, but they have nothing to do with tradition. They are trade. They are practical trade, creating alliances and mortgaging your daughter to a chief, a man that is old enough to be the father, a man that knows nothing about her, and then they will tell you, marriage is thing, you know, it's a thing you learn as you go. But is it supposed to be like that?
Thank you, sir. On to you, Mr. Erin. We need to read this book because actually it's something that takes us back to 16th century.
Yeah.
Even if none of us is ready to go back to that particular period, we know what happened in Nigeria in the 16th century. However, my question is, what speaks more vocal or important as the central theme that this book needs to be read?
There are several themes in the play. One of them, as I said before, is the quest for power. In every society, both pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial, there's always that quest for power. So how do you, an individual, drive his aspirations and also realize it? That is part of what happened in this play, because Yantrawala himself was rightly the heir to the throne of Kanem-Borno Empire, but he was denied. So, and one good thing he did here, instead of staying to fight his younger brother, as we usually see in Nigerian politics, he decided to go his way. He was told that he was going to be a king. And so all of a sudden, he realized he couldn't fulfill that dream in Kanem-Borno Empire. So he led 72 men and women and marched southward. He didn't know where he was going to, but he knew he was going to find a kingdom. Eventually, he conquered territories along the way. He was coming from an Islamic background. He was moving into territory controlled by traditionalists who were not used to Islam. So there was a clash of culture and clash of ideas. Eventually, he triumphed. So that zeal in man to get to the zenith of his ambition is overpowering in this play. And also, if you look at that play, we also see how we have gender issue there. Yantrawala believed that the end justifies the means. When he was finding it difficult to conquer territories, he was moving with a caravan. He had weapons, but the other people didn't have that. What the other communities and chiefdoms he met relied on their juju while he was using weapons. So there was a battle. In fact, it took him many years. And sometimes when he found it difficult to conquer the other people that were using juju, what he did was to befriend women from those chiefdoms. When he befriended those women, and he gave the secret how this military was strong, he will now find the secret and conquer the community and move on to the next community. So it took him several years to get to that. And somebody accused me of being a misogynist, that I hated women because so many women were killed in that play. I didn't do it. I was trying to recreate history. I was trying to interpret history. And in recreating history, you have to do justice to the reality. So I don't think I'm a misogynist. I merely interpreted history to depict what happened in the 16th century. So when you read that book, you have to you see how the traditional society reacted to Islamic society, and also how the hero saw the women as a launch pad to his greatness, no matter what it takes, whether they are dead, whether they died, or whether they're not. So these are just part of the compelling strand.
Thank you very much, sir. Please, a round of applause for him, please. Thank you for that. And I don't think one of the audience will take you as a misogynist, like we have stated earlier. You know, it has a perspective, and recreating history goes beyond personal and subjectivity. You have to be objective. You have to look both left and side. All right, over to you, sir. Your book elevates the unity of Africa. How does your book justify that?
Well, look around you. Everywhere you see chaos. People who don't understand themselves. And people who go in a group to go and meet up with countries. Every day you hear of China meeting with African heads of states. Russia meeting with African heads of states. Doesn't that tell you something? It goes to tell you that even your so-called, the so-called, in quotes, people who came with the colonial idea, see you still as one, as Africans. So it's long overdue that we get our act together. This book, Bookboy, that I'm speaking of, is situated in around 2009 to 2010, when we had a very traumatic period. We had a head of state who fell ill and disappeared. So the running theme of the book is about the goings-on during that period when we didn't understand or know what was happening. But I felt that it was the usual impunity by the political class that looked at the electorate as nothing. Because, I mean, how will you have a president that will disappear without handing over the reins of power to the vice president? And coincidentally, the vice president came from a place you call, in quotes again, minority, South-South. I mean, and you saw what played out later. This same vice president was vilified by those who are the current actors who have taken the reins of power. God knows, in terms of little things that he did then, like trying to raise the fuel price and co, the people who banded against him who are now running the country. So there's so much that made me think in writing this book that I had to also offer solutions. You know, try my best to find out if we could find commonalities in who we are. Because, you see, hitherto the whole story has been one in which Africa does not have similarities, that we had more dissimilarities than similarities. But if you look at it, there are quite a number of things that, I mean, I had a publication called Shekere. Why did I choose that title, Shekere? You look at Shekere as an instrument. It's an instrument common to most African countries. It's an instrument today that is playing out in the African diaspora, in Brazil, in Cuba, in the south of the US. It's well known, but it may have different names. But at the same time, it has a lot of beats that come together in a nexus. If you look at the beats, there are so many beats on a shekere. But doesn't it come across as a harmonious instrument? It's an instrument that centers us as Africans. Listen to Fela's music. Most times, what centered Fela's music was the shekere. If you listen to that bit of the shekere, it was always there. Immediately you knew it was an African. So there are so many commonalities that I chased in this book, Bogwe, as a continuation of this one. By the way, I have copies here in case anyone is interested. So aside from that, there was also the parallel story of the economic challenges we have at play in a character who had fallen foul of the principal antagonist, who coincidentally is your archetypal politician in the country. Greed, driven by greed and so forth. And this guy was now forced to leave the country using the illegal route as a migrant. So you follow his journey through different countries, from Ghana to Burkina Faso, through even Mauritania that has been hostile to people of dark skin color, then all the way to Libya, then unfortunately meeting the Gaddafi issue. So there's so many stories running in this story, and the way I write my books, aside from my book on short stories, the way I write my books, I use multiple characters because we have very strong characters. There's strong characterization in this part of the world. You're not just looking at the usual linear story. You know, I tell lateral stories. It's not about the linear building up like a pyramid. It's the one where you can even invert the cone, you know, or change it sideways and all that. Because the characters are there, and the stories are there, and the contradictions are there, and the solutions are possibly there. And I mentioned one in fractals. I pray you go check fractals up, and you find that our ancestors used this successfully. And all they did, like the scientists they were very early on, was to study nature all around them. Studying animals, studying the forest. What's a fractal? I'll give you an example. If you look at a leaf, you see different striations on the leaf. And you find out that the basic stem that runs through, there are replications all through. And it's not just a leaf. You see it in, you look at a river, the delta, you know, and they use all these things in understanding how to sort out chaos. You mentioned kinship. That's why we are so strong on kinship. Because when you have a network, you are stronger. There's a commonality. There's a chain. You're only as weak as the weakest part of your chain. So they saw it in all these things, and they went ahead to embed it in their thinking, in their art. If you see the kind of things we did, in our languages. If you check our languages are unusually linked. That's why we have sing-song languages. That's why when we speak, it's highly metaphorical. It sounds flowery, but it is evocative. Our ancestors understood evocation. And it all comes out in the book, in the characters, the way they interplay with themselves. And at the end of the day, there is hope for continuity. If, for once, we look at ourselves, really look at ourselves, and shed out all the flesh that holds us back. When I say flesh, the usual tribalism, you know, fear, ignorance, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. A round of applause for him, please. That is brilliant. Don't forget that this is book fair, so we need to raise a few excerpts from the book because readers are leaders. So we want each author to read one captivating paragraph that you feel that strikes your attention when you are writing. You know, as a writer, there's some a particular line that you come back like 50 times, be like, wow, this particular paragraph really touch or addresses some issues in the book. And before we move on to questions from the audience, so over to you, sir.
It's really difficult for me to choose where to read. knowledge they have is stronger than the one you have. Your book, you have book knowledge, but you lack wisdom. So when they speak out of wisdom. So in this page 269, the uncle said to Daisy, I am glad you have forgiven your parents, and most importantly, your mother. I want to thank you for empowering and reintegrating her into the society. She suffered humiliation at my brother's hand. May your children and your children's children reward you in the same manner. I said a very long amen. He recounted the story of their childhood and how their parents, who were great farmers, knew nothing about Western education. Yet, they were full of wisdom, generosity, caring, love, and sincerity back then. Children were a communal heritage. Everyone cared for and looked after them like they were their own blood children. Life was what you live in. Everybody in the community was his brother's keeper. We used to harvest yam and leave them in heaps for weeks before bringing them to the yam barn. There were no such incidents as stealing your neighbor's yam because it was taboo and because everybody had enough for their family. Land disputes occasionally happened between communities, but not among kinsmen or brothers. That was because they owned the land communally and cultivated it rotationally. We had our local goats and cows. We had our headsmen, who were predominantly young teenagers. They tended the animals with extreme care and pastured them exclusively in non-cultivated areas because it was a sacrilege to allow them stroll into somebody's farm. Things has fallen apart, he concluded with a long sigh.
Thank you very much, sir. I love the last part, things has fallen apart. Mr. Erin, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm moving straight to the prologue. I want to situate the context of the story, how it all started. In early 15-something, when there was a crisis in Yemen that led to the flight of Asghar, the queen of Yemen. A battlefield around the palace of the embattled Yemeni king. In the background, acoustics, sounds of muskets reverberate, and the stage lighting and mood reflect tense atmosphere. Confused voices echo, cries of despair, sounds of guns, hoofs, and the whinnies of running horses in a battlefield. Clashes of swords, screams of the wounded, sounds of burning houses. On stage now, a number of masked men with pale skin appear with bonfire, singing, mocking, and victorious chants. They disappear after a couple of minutes. In a short while, a frightened woman appears on stage, shaking, panting, and in hiding, with fear written all over her face. Asghar, that's the queen of Yemen, exclaiming in Arabic, in fear, Teja Akbar, Teja Akbar. They have killed my husband. My husband is gone. They have killed my hero. Who else do I have in the world? What else do I have left? Life has lost its meaning to me. Who will assuage my fears and lend me a helping hand? Who? Who? The Egyptian invaders have overrun our kingdom. They have overrun our palace. Where do I go now? Where? I've lost everything. My family, my home, my jewelry, and my sanity. Where do I go now? Two blustering men with antiquated guns and chains enter the stage, searching here and there for a woman they had her footfalls, and discovering the harassed-looking lady crouching in a corner. Slave raider from Canaan Bonu is speaking now, laughing mechanically and pointing to Asghar. What good luck we got here. What a good catch. Slave raider 2 is speaking, smiling smugly. What a beautiful day it is turning out to be. She must surely be a gift from the ancestors and Allah. And she fell into our hands without us running and gasping for breath or breathing our feet in hot pursuit. Slave raider 1. This is my definition of good fortune. that which is staring us in the face right now. Wow. Slavery that too. How I wish every day was like this. Asgard. Oh, on her knees, begging, please, don't harm me. Please, spare my life. They've already killed my husband. The Egyptians have killed the love of my life. Please, don't harm me. Please, please. Slavery but one. Woman, we are not interested in your death. We are no hirelings from the Pharaoh, from Pharaoh. We are not from the vanquished Yemen either. We came from Gazagamu in the great Canaan Empire. We are like birds in the sky. We roam wherever our might and horses allow us to go. Slavery river two, to Asgard. So you are more useful to us alive than dead. Asgard, gasping. I cursed my luck, exclaiming in anguish. Taja Akbar. She struggles frantically and screaming at the slave raider. One, as the slave raider one lifts her off her feet and off the stage. Atrukni Wadi, leave me alone. Atrukni Wadi, leave me alone. Atrukni, leave me alone. Now we move on to, okay, you want to stop?
Please continue.
Slave raider 2, as he departs the stage with the chains, he says, that's a good catch. We are rising our luck. Our cowries from Gazagamu are bound to multiply overnight. Laughs aloud. What a good day. To the audience, are we not lucky? Sounds of running horses and whinnies of horses echo and trail off in the background acoustics. Narrator appears on stage. Lend me your ears, everybody. I want to take you back to the 16th century and tell you about Yamtarawala, the son of the king of Ngazagamu, the ancient capital of Canaan Empire, whose mother came from Yemen. Yamtarawala's mother, Asgard, was a beautiful slave put off for slave in a slave market. The son of the Yemeni king saw her and liked her and bought her. But when he presented her to the father as the girl he would like to marry, the king snatched her and she became the king's wife.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for him, please. Over to Mr. Obayon. An excerpt, short excerpt from the book.
Thank you. First, I must quickly add that the book is available on Kindle, the Amazon Kindle, and also it can be bought as a print on demand. So remember, bookwear. Now, I find it very difficult getting an excerpt, you know. But what I'll do is I'll go straight to the epilogue. If you recall, I said there was a running story about someone who fell foul of the primary antagonist, and he escaped from the country as an illegal migrant. Now he gets to Libya and ends up joining a so-called group that wants to come back and create insurrection in the country. Now, this is the character I'm describing. From the top of the uncompleted three-story building, the man peered through his telescope. He had his crosshair on the man wearing the resplendent white agbada. He had finally gotten Chief Joan Adebisi where he wanted him. This was his long sought-after revenge for the loss of his family at the hands of Chief and his CSO, Alagbon. The former was a gunner. The latter was a gunner as well. One by one, turn by turn, both slated for death. The man was about to squeeze the trigger when two things happened simultaneously, confusing him. First, he saw two men in dark safari suits suddenly accosting and arresting Chief and Alagbon on the Supreme Court's exterior staircase. Secondly, his mobile phone rang, and its shrill sound spooked him, for he thought he had turned the power off. The man quickly glanced at the number. He was numb with shock, then dizzy with joy. She had survived. He had saved her local number as a code, and staring at it triggered half-fed memories. He peered through his telescope again, and his finger tightened on the trigger. His crosshair was still on his enemy. Suddenly he sighed, a long drawn-out sigh. The man felt deflated. He could not do it. He had lost interest. The middle-aged man named Neighbor gave a hand-curved Chief John Adebisi one long-lasting look of disgust before he got up, stretched his limbs, and picked up his bag. He called the number. He heard her childlike voice, and a faint stirring suddenly burst forth from his chrysalis of palpitating hate and overcame him with an overwhelming yearning for her. Vengeance was no substitute for love. Love trumped hate. The future was suddenly bright.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for the three of them. That is brilliant. We allowed them to read excerpts from it so that you can get an insight into the book. It is time to actually focus of our time. I want to take a question from the audience before I ask my panelists the last 1 minute question each regarding how this book resonates with the theme of this year, Hope is a Stubborn Thing, considering one of the protagonists in your book. But before we do that, let's see if we can take questions from the audience, online, on physical. Do you have any question in the house regarding the books we just read and we just discussed now? Any question? Okay, while we are thinking about the question, let me ask one after the other. So, the theme of Labaf 2024 is Hope, Breakout. Hope is a stubborn thing. Is there any line of this idea in your book? And which of the characters display or portray this in your book?
Thank you once again. And may I use this opportunity to say happy birthday to Wole Soyinka. 90 years is not 90 days. And he has lived it with dignity, with experience, both writing and politics, all mixed together. Now, hope is a stubborn thing. I will most likely associate it to the character Adeze, who is a principal character. And the stubborn thing about it is that she felt challenged and she felt motivated when the mother literally thought that it was crazy of her to think of becoming a lawyer. It became a challenge. It became a stubborn challenge within her that she made up her mind that whatever it cost to become a lawyer, she was going to be one. When she finished secondary school, strangely enough, just before the registration for the university, the EFCC arrested the uncle who had promised to send her to school. So all her hopes died. The parents, even if they sold all they had, could not do anything to help her. She ran helter-skelter. She first of all thought of going to the parish priest, who listened to her diligently, and then prayed for her and said, well, it is well with you. She didn't understand. She felt embarrassed, but she thanked him anyway because he prayed, and that gave her hope. It was when she was thinking about it that she said, well, he had nothing to offer me. He could have given me a scholarship, but he didn't give me. But because he blessed me, I'm going to run with that blessing. And then she went back to her principal in school and narrated her story. Her principal gave her 30,000 naira and said this was all she had, but she's given this widow's mite, believing that the zeal you have at the end of the day that you're going to make it. When she came back and narrated the story to the father, how the uncle has been arrested, how the wife is powerless. The uncle was a millionaire, but the wife didn't have access to anything. She was totally empty. At that juncture, the father was so motivated that he decided to sell his only piece of land to make sure that the daughter goes to the university. And she promised to buy back that land if eventually it was still vacant by the time she finished. Time passed. Her story went. She rejected many people that wanted to marry her and pay for her school fees. She went into soap making to train herself. She opened practically a soap factory in her house, and then had youth empowerment, and through her pastor, eventually, she was able to raise enough money with the support of the father, and eventually became a lawyer. That was hope.
Thank you very much, sir. A round of applause for him, please. Mr. Erin, how stubborn is hope in this historical drama?
Yeah. Yan Tarawala, the hero himself, embodies hope because he lost his rights. As the heir apparent, he was being prepared to be the king, but he lost that chance, that opportunity. So he had the hope that he was going to be a king, if not in Kanembonu, elsewhere. So that hope drove him to embark on a mission and on a conquest that ended in glory. He broke away, in fact, from Canaan and founded an empire, a kingdom called Biu. Biu is the second largest emirate in Borno State after Maiduguri. And it is the only place in Borno State Boko Haram has never conquered. Till now. The emir never ran away. All the kings ran away from Borno when Boko Haram entered and we are in full force. But the emir of Biu didn't run away. Till now, Boko Haram has not entered Biu.
Thank you very much, sir. A round of applause for him, please. Finally, sir, considering the social vices in Africa, in Nigeria, economy, bad economy, how strong is hope display in your novel? How strong do you think the protagonists and the characters in your novel did justice by elevating hope? Like I've said earlier, that your book elevated unified African. So how strong do you think your characters in the novel give a justified conclusion to hope?
Okay, I'll just read a short excerpt here. The protagonist, the hero, he goes, this was after a court case, which he won. He goes, each and every one of us has a voice. We should use it. He cried aloud above the tumult caused by the discordant ranting of Chief John Adebisi's brand of wayfarers. Comrade, maybe you never hear this our people proverb before. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent a night with a mosquito. And let the footsteps of our great African past inspire the legacies of our tomorrow. Benny, a chicken must come home to roost. High Chief Ogbon Obadele replied with a smile. So on that note, it ends, or rather, it ends on a high note. The possibilities inherent in our situation, that we can go past these challenges that we have if we're willing to try original ways, if we're willing to think out of the box, to start asking African questions to get African answers. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for my beautiful panelists. I'm honored to be the moderator for today, and to be honest, I can actually say that these three books are like a trilogy. If you tend to listen to each analysis, you tend to see one dive into the other, and lastly down to the one. So do not forget that the importance of literacy is to educate, and that's what Buttreg is actually pushing out, you know, just like what Daddy said in the beginning, talking about references to the scripture. So it is important why we need to read. And that will be for today, while we hand over the microphone to Mr. Samuel Zazie.
Thank you very much. Please, let's give them a round of applause one more time. I know we'll not get tired of clapping and clapping. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Prince Alom, good to have you again, sir. And Mr. Obayan Halim, book boy. Mr. Henry Akubiro, thank you very much. It was indeed an expose into, the prevailing narratives in our society. And of course, the number one function of literature is to reflect the happenings, in the society, in as much as the writer does not write in isolation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to just, capture this beautiful moment in some still pictures as well as, video recording. So let's go ahead and memorialize this particular panel before we call it a day. Bearing in mind that in the next 2 minutes, we'll all be heading to the amphitheater. We'll be having a stage play, stage reading of Maren, an immersive play on the enigma called Professor Wole Soyinka, written by Babatunde Ogunbanwo, and the synopsis goes thus. Celebrating Wole Soyinka's legacy as poet, dramatist, and advocate for change, Maren captures the extraordinary life of Wole Soyinka, tracing his rise from humble beginnings to literary icon and activist. Set against political turmoil, it explores his struggles, triumphs, and unwavering commitment for justice. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here with us today. The last event takes place at the amphitheater. And also, I'd like to remind you that Lagos Book and Art Festival continues tomorrow, Sunday, November 17th, 2024. And we commence here by exactly 11 a.m. Thank you very much. Please, let's proceed to the amphitheater and have the last meal of the day. Thank you very much.